When I first got back into leatherwork, I was marking my stitches using an inexpensive overstitch wheel. I bought this one because it was a standard size that I was using at the time, and it worked fairly well. I was able to mark out the stitches. The way that this works is, after making your stitching line, you press in and roll, and you're left with indentations that you can then use to pierce through with a stitching awl and proceed to saddle stitch. Now, if you look closely, you can see that this actually wiggled a little bit, and I didn't get it quite in the stitching groove all the way down. The other issue with this one is that it's only one size. So not too long ago, I purchased this one, which comes with several wheels, and essentially you can unscrew, change out the wheel for a different stitch count. And this worked fairly well. Again, I did have the issue with, if you didn't line it up perfectly, it could wiggle out of the stitching groove. The other problem was, as I was rolling through, one of these screws nicked the side of a case I was working on. So as I was rolling, it brushed up against the side and put a scratch in a nearly finished project. I started looking for reviews on stitching irons, also called pricking irons, and there's a little bit of a difference between the two. However, all of the ones that I found were fairly expensive. I didn't have a couple of $100s to buy a set. I was trying to do this inexpensively, and these only cost $10, $12 for a set. So I started looking at some of the imports. On a whim, I decided to order a Chinese-made set from Amazon. This is the brand that I ordered. It was a 4mm spacing, which is the standard size that I wind up using for larger items like holsters and belts. And I have to say, I was really pleasantly surprised. It comes with a 1, 2, 4, and 6 prong iron. When I first got these, they would go in fairly easily, but it was really difficult to pull them back out of the leather. So I decided to do a tune-up, and what I did was I polished the inside edges. The outside faces were nice and smooth and well polished right out of the box, but these edges, let's come up close here, were quite rough. You can see they're pretty shiny now. Well, as I started working on some various projects, the 4mm spacing was a little bit too large. So I went ahead and ordered another set in 3mm, but that brand was out of stock at the time. And the set that I ordered was another Chinese-made brand, and I figured, hey, they're probably all the same. What I received was quite rough, even after being polished, and I wound up having to grind down the edges because there was big voids in there. You can see that the spacing is not quite even, and as a matter of fact, on this one, part of the tooth is even ground away when they started shaping it. I used these for 1 or 2 projects, but they were really difficult to clean up, and I wasn't happy overall. So I kept an eye out, and as soon as these were available, I went ahead and ordered a set of 3mm from the same brand. And I have to say, I was really happy with them. They were all well made. They lined up nicely. The spacing was dead even from size to size. So if you started with one, you could move on to another. And I'm assuming these are all machine cut with a multi-tooth cutter. The one problem I did have is the same as I had with the 4mm, is that they're a little bit rough. So I stopped in another project and tuned up one set. We should still be able to see here that these are kind of rough. Now the faces again are nicely polished. But for $10 or $11, I really can't complain. So what I wanted to do was talk through what I've done, and this is the one that I tuned up, talk through what I've done to polish these up and get them ready for use. It only took a couple of minutes, but you can tell the difference right away. So they go in and they come out. Before tuning up, they go in, but the rough edges would grab the leather quite a bit. And actually this one you can probably see pretty well. I'll go ahead and take some still photos. So I tuned one up for the last project. I have 3 more to address. The 1, 4, and 6. And by the time I get done polishing these, they'll go in and out of the leather just as easy as this one does. What I'm going to use are some accessories that come in just about any cheap rotary tool kit, whether name brand or not. Some of these little sanding discs, and I've got 2 different grits here. One's rather fine, one's a little bit coarser. An arbor for those, and a buffing wheel, and a little thing of rouge that shows up in the package that you're never really sure what to do with. All I really want to do is come in and sand down the edge to get rid of the machine marks. And then once that's nice and smooth, we'll come back with a finer grit and then we'll polish it out. And that's really all it takes on each one. We'll just repeat the process, then come back with the finer disc and then polish them. Now the important thing is to maintain the angle. You don't want to change the angle or the shape of these. Just like polishing a knife though, if you watch as you're going and you watch where the shiny mark is, you should be able to see if you need to adjust the angle at all. Now you could use a diamond wheel or an abrasive disc. The thing I like most about using these little sandpaper discs is that the back kind of serves almost as a safe edge, so you're not going to accidentally grind away on the edge of the tooth next to it. Now, the first disc I used and I went essentially across the prong or across the tooth. I came in from the edge, so the lines are going this way. This time I want to use more of the end so that the lines are going more front to back, essentially in the direction that this will enter and exit the leather. All right, now I'm going to switch over and we can buff these. I'll go ahead and charge it with rouge. Now I do want to polish these front to back, and if you go this way, it's likely to grab, and that's never any fun. So I'm going to be sure as I do this that I hold them to where there's nothing for this to grab. This does get a little on the messy side, so be sure to clean up your work surface before you start on your next project. And that's it. In just a couple of minutes, we were able to take a relatively inexpensive set of stitching chisels and polish them up. All we have left to do is clean them up and give them a test. So even after a bit of cleanup, there still may be a little bit of residue in there. It's always good to run them through a couple of pieces of leather before you use them again on your project. And as far as anybody wondering about how sturdy these are, I've regularly driven them straight through several pieces of leather into my project mat, and I haven't had an issue with them yet. All right, so this is 8 to 9 ounce leather and a 4-prong chisel all the way through into the project mat. And it pops right out once you get it out of the project mat. Let me see if I have another piece of leather to drive this into. Scissors all the way through, and they pop right out. So just a few minutes with a couple of tools that you probably already have laying around. We give them a little bit of a polish. Let's see if we can catch the light there. And they work just as well as a more expensive set. I'll go ahead and put the link to both of these down in the description. And I'm also going to put a link to Armitage Leather. Watching his channel is basically where I saw these just about for the first time. I'd seen lacing chisels before, but they wind up putting large slots for doing, lacing. Nigel Armitage has done an extensive review of many of the best sets out there. The one that I didn't see was a cheap set. But again, for under 15 bucks for a full set, it's really hard to beat if you have an extra 10 or 15 minutes to spend polishing them up.